With all the ignorance, with all the confusion, with all of the uncertainty about NIL, since it was introduced, since it was declared to be under the guidelines of the NCAA in the summer of 2021, so 2.5 years ago, with all of that and the countless hours that we've discussed it here at the Voice of College Football, and all the information and all the perspective, all the insight that we've taken in from various people all over the place, all over the industry concerning NIL. And again, the lack of laws, the lack of guidelines, the confusion and the differences in laws from state to state, with all of that in play, what was the one thing, besides the players making money, besides a lot of the players kind of getting rich, that was pretty clear to all of us? I think more than anything else, the one thing that was clear to me and clear to all of you, most of you, throughout this process, was that NIL was not supposed to be an inducement to lure players to a particular school. It was not supposed to be that. It was not supposed to be something that enticed, allured, induced a player to sign at a particular school. It was supposed to be something that was presented after the player made his commitment, his decision, after he signed, got his scholarship, enrolled, and then boom, this is what we have available for you. Well, regardless of what I thought, regardless of what you thought, regardless of what we think should probably be healthy for the industry, healthy for college football, even healthy for the student athletes themselves, forget all of that. Forget it. It will not exist. It has shown and proven to be, at least through this first initial stage of the courts, based on a decision made by the federal judge in Tennessee, it is legal, it is lawful, and it's opened the door, we believe, to NIL collectives being out in the open, working with coaches to bring players to those particular schools. Out in the open, above board, no holds barred, all of it in broad daylight, based on the ruling today in Tennessee. So let's get to that. We'll read the article that's posted on ESPN, and we will try to make sense of it and highlight what this means and the key points in all of this. I have my particular perspective on what I believe NIL should be, what it could be for the athlete, what would maintain in many ways an amateur style structure for college athletics and college football in particular, and would maintain some emphasis on student athlete and maintain the structure and cause most of us to feel still good about the process, still good about the decisions that student athletes are making, yet provide them the opportunities that they have been provided for the last 2.5 years as American citizens in a large money-making system. So I don't want them to be left out. But this is going to fly in the face of that in many ways. So here we go. A federal judge in Tennessee granted a preliminary injunction Friday that prohibits the NCAA from punishing any athletes or boosters for negotiating name, image, and likeness deals through their recruiting process or while they are in the transfer portal. Okay. The injunction is not a final ruling in the case, but the judge's decision will likely have an immediate and dramatic impact on how NIL deals are used in the recruiting process. So, the NCAA's prohibition likely violates federal antitrust laws and harms student athletes, according to U.S. District Judge Clifton Corker. He wrote in his decision on Friday. We had a live stream a couple weeks ago with Genetics 56 and with Tony Altamore, and they basically stated that verbatim in advance, that the NCAA violates federal antitrust law, which I believe any of us that have any small understanding and knowledge of how antitrust law works, and I will emphasize from myself, a small knowledge, small perspective, but still an understanding of it, knew that. However, we will get into and see what the NCAA has been arguing on its merits and its final argument point, basically, in holding on to its control of college football, its control of the sport, its control of access, its control of the money flow. NCAA rules prohibit athletes from signing NIL contracts that are designed as inducements to get them to attend a particular school. One of the few restrictions in place for how athletes can make money. For example, there's been 2 cases thus far, and this was supposed to be a third involving Tennessee, but the NCAA recently announced sanctions against Florida State's football because a member of its coaching staff connected a prospect, basically gave them transportation with a booster collective that works closely with Florida State. The collective made a specific offer to the player who was considering transferring from another school. So he was a college player to Florida State. And because there was a service given by the coaching staff to allow the connection to be made, the communication to be made, the meeting between the collective, the booster, and the player, that's a violation. And until today, it's a violation. The Attorney General of Tennessee and Virginia argued that the NCAA is illegally restricting opportunities for athletes by preventing them from negotiating the terms of the NIL deals prior to deciding where they want to go to school. That is against the law, according to the Attorney General of Tennessee and Virginia, and according to this federal court judge. That is against the law to say you cannot entice or induce an athlete to come to your school financially. You can do that legally. The lawsuit was filed January 31st, one day after University of Tennessee Chancellor Donde Plowman revealed in a letter to the NCAA that the school's athletic department was being investigated for potential recruiting rules violations. In Friday's ruling, Corker, the federal judge, determined that the attorney generals have a reasonable chance of winning their case and that the athletes could suffer irreparable harm if the restrictions remain in place while the case is being decided. That I don't necessarily understand or get, that you could argue that that a particular athlete or all the athletes are suffering irreparable harm. It's irreparable. Do we understand and know what that term means? How is it irreparable? If I'm a great high school football player and I'm looking at 5 of the top programs in the country and I've made my list and I've knocked it down to 5 of those, and let's say that the NCAA is able to restrict inducements, where prior to today, Friday, February, whatever the date is, and the NCAA still has the power and control, theoretically, even though it's happening out there, they do have that power and control, whether they're able to enforce it or find all the The violators, that's another story. But under the NCAA's authority from Thursday backwards, back in time, they have this authority. If I'm a great football player, I'm looking at 5 schools. And let's say, again, this is prior to today, I'm not able to be induced by any of them. I understand that they've got collectives. I know that they're huge football brands. They have to have large NIL collectives. I'm able to talk to athletes already on the team. I'm able to get all sorts of information, but I cannot be officially contacted by the school or a collective connected to the school to say, hey, we've got $1 million for you. And then I go ahead and I decide, since I don't know exactly what the figures are at each school, that I am going to go based on education, based on the coaching staff, based on the ability to develop me as an NFL player, based on how good I think the team is. All of those other factors are going to be my deciding factors. And I decide to go to one of these schools, and I only receive X number of dollars through their NIL collective instead of X number of dollars that are higher over here, but I can still transfer. I can still sign further NIL deals. I can have 1 million NIL deals. That's another thing that we don't necessarily get into, and I've never heard discussed, but are these athletes, are they restricted to one NIL deal? Why? I don't believe they are. So just because I made a decision that wasn't the utmost business decision because I didn't know, I couldn't be induced. How is that irreparable harm? That's not irreparable harm. Is that harm? Yes, because I'm making $850 a year instead of $1 million over here because I didn't know what they had to offer me. I only in theory knew that all 5 of these offers were going to be big offers, were going to be great, but I didn't know exactly what the dollar figures are because I can't be induced. But I chose one that's a little bit less. Is that irreparable harm? No, I can transfer and I can sign other NIL offers at the same school. How is that irreparable harm? I don't agree with that. Anthony Scrimetti, Tennessee's Attorney General, said in a statement Friday that his office plans to litigate the case, quote, to the fullest extent necessary to ensure that the NCAA's monopoly cannot continue. Quote, the NCAA is not above the law and the law is on our side. Scrimetti says this: I think this will be one more brick in the wall that is the end of the NCAA. Wait a minute, said noted college athletics attorney Tom Mars, who worked with the Tennessee collective. Okay, don't necessarily need to read all that. A bad case is a bad case, and they've put all their defenses forward, Mars said, and there's no precedent anywhere in the United States that supports their defenses. Okay. Turning upside down rules overwhelmingly supported by member schools will aggravate an already chaotic collegiate environment. The NCAA fully supports student athletes making money from their name, image, and likeness. Well, they didn't up until 2 years ago, and is making changes to deliver more benefits to student athletes, but an endless patchwork of state laws and court opinions make clear partnering with Congress is necessary to provide. I don't want to get into the weeds here. Okay, let's find anything else that is relevant, because I'm going to read to you what the NCAA's case is. Quote, while the NCAA permits student athletes to profit from their NIL, it fails to show how the timing of when a student athlete enters such an agreement would destroy the goal of preserving amateurism, the judge wrote. So he's the one that counts. Skermetti says that he's willing to work with the NCAA in the meantime to find a middle ground. I didn't really understand that part of it. I read through that and thought, you are looking to take away their monopoly and you're going to work with them. Okay. Let's get to, okay, here we go. In an interview with ESPN on Tuesday, why does ESPN get to interview all these people? Why don't they come on the Voice of College Football? We could do a better interview here. Anyway, in an interview with ESPN on Tuesday, NCAA President Charlie Baker said the restriction on recruiting inducements was written because the association wants athletes to choose their future schools based on the best educational opportunities rather than where they could make the most money. And then he added in athletics later. And that's where I think most of us feel comfortable. And I'm not saying it's legal, I'm not saying it's right, but I think that's where most of us as college football fans feel good, would feel better about the situation, that this athlete chose my school, chose my favorite team because he knows we can win championships. He knows that there's a good coaching staff that can develop him as a player, that actually is looking out for him as a person. That actually happens still, I think. I know it does. And he actually likes the campus. He likes the location. He actually grew up a fan of the team, maybe. Maybe that still happens. All of those things. I think that's what we would like to know is happening. And then, hey, once he gets there and he arrives at Kansas State or Washington or UCLA or North Carolina or Clemson or Alabama or Vanderbilt, then he finds out, oh, wow, NIL collectives. Yeah, I've talked about this with players on the team already. I already know about this. I already know the opportunities, but now I'm officially presented this and bam, we're okay. Okay, they're a capitalist in our great society, the United States of America, which I believe is still a capitalist society, regardless of how many people out there are socialists in this day and age, which I can't believe. That's an argument for another channel. How anybody could be a socialist, I have no idea. All right, be a capitalist. If you're still a capitalist, then you understand, okay, great. They've made their decision. They're playing football at this school. They're going to class. All right, now they can make $1 million. Fine. Because there are the collectives out there, the boosters, the businesses out there to support it, and the fan contributions to support it, to support that $1 million NIL offering. That's the position that the NCAA is defending. However, unfortunately, I can't defend it legally. I can't defend anything legally. I'm not a lawyer, but I can't defend that legally. I can defend it morally, ethically. Again, I think it was a place where a lot of college football fans, I can't speak for all of you, but I think it's a place where a lot of college football fans felt more comfortable that you can't induce a player to a school. And even though we all knew it was going on, we at least felt good that it was against the rules. It would be like if you selected your busiest highway close to your house, in your city, in your community, and suddenly it was decided there's no speed limit, none, zero. Well, there's still going to be people driving 65. Some are still going to adhere to 75 because they feel comfortable 10 miles over what was the speed limit. There are going to be others that are going to just drive their car as fast as they possibly can. They are going to drive 120 miles an hour, regardless of the weather conditions. There are going to be all sorts of different people approach that differently, just like this situation with college football. The speed limit was 65, and there were those who were driving 68, others were driving 78, others were driving on the shoulder at 127 and swerving and lane kipping and yeah, and some other schools we could mention maybe. Yeah, I picked on Lane Kiffin there. I was just kidding. Okay. Because I don't necessarily think that just because certain schools are bringing in the best athletes and spending the most money, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing it or were doing it before today, doing it against the rules. That's not necessarily, I think we have warped thinking when it comes to a lot of these situations that we just automatically think, okay, well, they're the most successful. They're spending the most money. They're bringing in the most players. So they've got to be cheating. They have to be the ones. Not necessarily. Different topic. So Charlie Baker, the NCAA president, is at least, even though it's flawed and it certainly appears to be illegal, is in a place defending the NCAA's position of keeping this sport where I think most of us brought it to that place where we still don't really like this. We're not really comfortable with it, but at least theoretically, we can feel good going forward that players are choosing schools for the right reason or what we want to be the right reasons. Baker also said, and this may be complete BS here. I can't really tell. I tend to think that this is complete BS because he says here, I also think it makes, so I just credited him with the previous statement, but this one, I also think it makes it enormously challenging as we are currently seeing in the existing NIL environment for kids and families to figure out what the right choice is in the first place, because an enormous amount of information flows their way that may not, in fact, be accurate. I don't know that this is going to clarify information or accuracy of information. And Charlie Baker said the same thing. Because the players would have contracts in hand before they ever decided on the school, they would have contracts in hand. So maybe a situation like what we saw with Jaden Rashada at the University of Florida would not happen going forward with this. So that could be a positive coming from this. Okay, the NCAA has issued 2 sanctions. We talked about that, Florida State, and then there's also one with Miami women's basketball. The NCAA struggled to enforce the inducement rule. We talked about that. There's a difference between having rules and then being able to enforce those rules. So they've had difficulty. So they've gone after 3 entities in 2.5 years: Florida State football, Tennessee football, Miami basketball. And then we would have had something concerning Florida football. Yeah, the rules allow coaches and collectives to share information about a prospect's potential earning power. We've talked about this a zillion times on here. As long as they don't make specific offers or promises. Baker told ESPN that he did not think the NCAA was ignoring reality by asking athletes to pick their schools based on academic and athletic opportunities and worry about NIL opportunities after they arrive. That's the way it's always worked. Will it work that way with no NIL 2.5 years ago and prior? And over the last 2.5 years, it worked this way in theory, for those situations that were within the rules. Okay. I am through the article. And what is legal, what is fair, what is just for the individual is not always good for the industry. This is and has become a messy situation because we have been mixing at a higher and higher rate each and every year. But even going back to the 1950s, really at the outset of television, really it was the start of television that exponentially increased revenue. Of course, that's where most of the revenue is made. Even in 2024, with all the other options of how to make money, it's still television. So since 1950, whatever, when the first college game was played on TV, and I know that in the early days, they had very strict limitations on number of games for each school and all of that, even up until into the 80s. And what that money was used for. But you're mixing amateur status and making money. And so as soon as that started, and it's escalated every year, the sport has become more popular, it's generated more money, and you have guys that technically don't make money. I'm not counting the guys that get the money under the table throughout the generations, and then also the scholarship, the value of the scholarship. I will always argue, and this takes us off into another deal, and as long as nobody's calling me, then it turns into me on my soapbox for countless hours. That's fine. What in the world are all of you guys talking about? Certainly have all sorts of people calling me, including our guy Tim Prangley, USC show. Catch it 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific time. And also the Big Ten Live show, which is coming your way at approximately 7 o'clock Eastern time, depending on what we're doing here, how many people are watching, the involvement, the engagement, and everything. But we will have our Big Ten Live show at approximately at 7 o'clock Eastern time, as we always do, somewhere in that range. So as soon as we get done here, the Big Ten Live show. I had a big thought to deliver there, and it's gone. It's gone. Let's check out your opinion on all of this. We do have a couple super chats coming in. So we've got comment coming in from Jackson Johnson, member for 6 months here at the Voice of College Football. So you can become a member here at the Voice of College Football. Join the community. Love to have you. You can do that one of two ways. Either join on Patreon, patreon.com/MarkRogersTV, or right here on YouTube. Become a YouTube channel member, and you get my predictions during the season, or have in the past. We're going to deliver more of a streamlined offering on Patreon and here on YouTube going forward, but we'll get to that in a couple months. You will certainly get a request of exclusive content as well as the Discord link. Jackson says 183 days until the kickoff of week 0 of the 2024 college football season and 188 days until kickoff of week 1. Okay. We also have Moose. Thank you for being here, Moose. A member for 10 months. Thank you for that, Moose. Over a month and a day till I get my year's badge. Exactly. Something to look forward to there, Moose. Absolutely you do. Absolutely you do. My thought just came back to me. I almost got into this the other night with NIL. So there's a few different things that come to mind here. One would be, I am still not getting name, image, and likeness. It was my understanding going into this in the summer of 2021, name, image, likeness meant that these athletes were going to come into contract, a partnership with an individual that just wants to sponsor them, or most likely a business. And they would need to reciprocate the financial gain with something, name, image, and likeness. They would need to represent that brand of whatever that is, whatever they're selling, whatever they represent. They would have to reciprocate with something. And I know that it's happened on occasion. Maybe it happens all the time. Maybe I just miss it because I don't follow any college football players on social media. Zero. I don't see myself in the future following any. So maybe I just missed this part of it, but I'm not seeing it. I'm not hearing about it by and large. I know Bo Nix, day one of NIL, was the front man for a iced tea down in Alabama. That's what I'm talking about. So I'm not really understanding where we stand there. It seems to be just, we are paying you to play. It's not supposed to be that. Now we can get into the pay for play model and what may be coming down the pike soon. In addition to NIL completely having the lid blown off with no restrictions, and basically companies coming at these athletes as high school seniors, high school juniors, high school sophomores, high school, can you imagine LeBron James in this? Well, he didn't need this, but I don't know how he would have worked that, because he went straight to the NBA, of course, made so much more money. However, he could have been paid in high school by the school that he would have ultimately choose, but he didn't choose the school because he went straight to the NBA. Regardless, pay for play, true pay for play, not NIL, but paying the athletes an income. I just am going to start the conversation with one question. I am going to do some rough math, and then if anyone has any insight into this, I have posed this a couple times before, and all I've received in response was basically, that's a good thought. That's an interesting idea. And let's see. Because if we're going to pay these players, if we're going to decide, okay, the NCAA is running an illegal cartel, these athletes are working their labor, they're not being paid. My first counterpunch to that is they are being paid. They are being paid. And I think more of you now that you're seeing these athletes making all this money through NIL are on board with this point that I'm about to make. Whereas when I used to make this point 3, 4, 5, 7 years ago, I usually got a lot of pushback when I said they are being paid. I'm not arguing that they're being paid enough because I don't know the finances. I don't get to see the ledger, the financial ledger, but they are being paid. Anyone who is paid for an education, whether that is for themselves or for a child, knows how much that thing is worth. And depending on the school these days, I only have a pretty good estimate based on my family situation and one of my children and knowing what it costs to go to school. And then looking at a bunch of other schools prior to that decision to find out and discover what it costs to go to various schools. They are being paid. Now, are they being paid in the way that they want to be paid? Maybe not. But it's called college athletics. It is college athletics. So my thought there would be, okay, can we make an agreement with the NFL that we are going to lift the ban restricting a certain age or experience level in college from being eligible to play in the NFL? Can we lift that ban? Let's just go ahead and lift it if we're going to go to a pay-for-play model and pay salaries to these players. That's number one. Let's do that. Because if they don't want to play in college under the guidelines that we will set, then they are free. They will be free to enter the NFL draft. And if they don't get drafted, they can go to an NFL camp and try to make it at 17 years old, 18 years old. Good luck. Or they can play college football under these conditions. That it is a college and you are a student athlete. Therefore, you are going to go to class and you are going to take tests and you are going to write papers and you are going to pass the classes. Okay. In addition to that, your scholarship is worth X number of dollars. I don't know what that is. What is that? $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 a year. So they are being paid that. Now, is that enough? Well, consider this. Take any team in college football that has 105 roster spots, 85 scholarships. And if that scholarship, that tuition is worth, let's do some rough math, $50,000 a year. If it's worth $50,000 a year, and I'm sure in this day and age with inflation being what it's been over the last couple of years, when I went to beautiful Kent State back in the late 1980s into 1990, that semester bill was less than $1,000. It's like $850 at the beginning. I think it was up to maybe 11 or 1200. But yeah, that was prehistoric times. Now, $50,000. Let's set it at $50,000. 85 scholarships. Your payroll is over $4 million. Okay. Let's just keep this to the power conferences, 70 teams, 4 million per. That's a $280 million payroll for the corporation of college football. Does the sport generate enough money? Well, I know that it generates more than 280 million, but when you take into account travel and coaches, administrators, training staff, all of the salaries involved there, food, and everything involved, equipment, everything involved, insurance. Take all that into consideration and about 47 other things that I'm not thinking about right now. Is the net profit from college football $280 million a year from the Power Five, Power Four? I have no idea. But until it exceeds that, then these players are being compensated, because any business that runs a profitable business, a business that is viable, that is responsible, brings in a certain amount of money, and a certain amount of a certain percentage of that is paid to the employees. And I don't know typically what that percentage is. I used to know. Let's see if we can find that. Let's see if there's an average of the amount of money that, okay, there we go. Good rule of thumb is to put 40 to 80% of your business revenue toward employee salaries. So let's say it's 60%. We'll split the difference. And the salaries of all the Power 5 football players is $280 million a year. That means that the net revenue, not the net, I guess the gross should be 450. So it leads me to this point. Before players are actually given money by the school in terms of a game check, that should be taken into consideration. And if it's not, then that's pathetic, ridiculous, and unfair, and not just. And then also beyond that, what is the taxpayer contribution to these situations? Is college football completely, I know it is at Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, etc., that it is extremely profitable. But at what point is it not profitable? And are the taxpayers paying for football to be played? And if the taxpayers are paying for football to be played, and for other sports certainly to be played, although at most of these schools, the football takes care of the other sports. So as long as all that is self-contained and the money can be earned and then poured back into the other sports and poured back into football and paying players and paying for their scholarships, and all of that can be self-contained without tapping the taxpayer, fine. But if I hear and it becomes known that these players start getting paid, and maybe even if the Michigans and the Oklahomas of the world can finance that, but collectively it can't be financed, but we're going to supplement with tax money, then we've got a real problem. Because for one thing, let's understand, for as big as college football is, and for as much as we love college football, the average American could care less about college football. It's very low on the list of entertainment options and entertainment preferences. The typical, even in a football crazed state, most of the people don't care. So why should their money go toward that? I don't have the answer to that. I don't know what the pay structure is. I don't know what the income structure is, and the revenue structure and the tax structure from Well, I already know that I pay for a lot of things, and I'm sure you do as well, depending on your value system. Oh, my word. I pay for things that I completely abhor. And if this were 1776, we would all pick up our pitchforks and our guns and our muskets. We'd load them up and go to town, because there's all sorts of things that I'm paying for as a taxpayer that are not only a waste. It used to be bad enough that there was a lot of waste in government. Now there's just a lot of corruption and a lot of things being paid for that are downright wrong. So I hope the tax portion of this isn't a burden to the taxpayer out there. Hmm. Hmm. Dave's here. Dave, we appreciate you. Thank you for the contribution, sir. He says, I don't want to come off of that with somebody think of the children type of guy, but can someone think about college basketball, for crying out loud, and how this is going to destroy the NCAA tournament? This that we're talking about today, Dave, we're talking about NIL. I don't see that how that has any impact on any one sport more so than other sports. And I want to do your super chat more justice than that, but I'm not understanding the impact on college basketball more so than maybe I'm thinking of something else. Maybe you're talking about, I don't know what you're talking about. If it concerns NIL, yeah, the NCAA tournament. Of course, we know that the NCAA runs the NCAA tournament. I would not be concerned with the NCAA tournament. If the NCAA tournament's in jeopardy, then all of college basketball is in jeopardy, because that's where they make all their money. So, Dave, I think you're safe with the NCAA men's basketball tournament or the women's tournament, whichever one you enjoy. All right, all right, all right. This kind of reminds me of the old days before we took too many calls, and I used to get on here and rant for hours. Oh, yes, Jackson, the Big Ten show is coming up at, I guess we will hit it on time. I just thought that maybe this would really get people fired up, because this is a huge deal, but it might be one of those things that strikes you as, you know what? I know it's a huge deal intellectually, but I really don't care, or I really don't have an opinion, or I really just don't want to talk about it. I get that. That's most of college football these days for me. I'm like, I know that's important. I should probably do a video on that. But you know what? I don't care, or I'm sick of talking about all of this business. I was making a list. Where'd that list go? I'll run this by everyone. I was making a list of all the content ideas coming up here at the Voice of College Football. We posted a video a couple hours ago looking at the best candidates from the ACC to go to the Big Ten or the SEC. We looked at football on the field right now. We looked at TV ratings. We looked at TV markets. We looked at football brand historically. We looked at academics. We looked at endowments. We looked at every reasonable angle, every main angle to the conversation, and the 7 ACC schools that I would currently deem as the most attractive to the Big Ten and the SEC. So check out the video. We just posted it. And maybe I'm going to look at the rest of the ACC. I would like to look at Wake Forest. I hope Wake Forest is playing meaningful power conference football 5 years from now? I hope so. It doesn't look good the way it's going. And the way it is going, schools like Louisville, NC State, Pitt, I'm curious about them. And of course, we've got these two on the West Coast with Washington State and Oregon State. I'm basically picking out programs that have really strong followings, that have been good football programs recently, not great, good, and appear to be not necessarily valued, attractive to the Big Ten or the SEC. And what's going to happen with them? I don't know if the Big Ten and or the SEC is going to look at a collection of schools like that, meaning I don't know if the Big Ten or the SEC, up until this point, what they've done is basically anytime they have considered expansion, what are they doing? Well, they're looking at that school, that football program, that athletic department, the academics, everything involved, but specifically the football, to say, once we add this school and add their football, is our value going to increase? Okay, we'll run to our partner, Fox or ESPN, and you tell us, if we add school X, do they add value? Because we're going to have to throw their money into the pot and redistribute among everyone else. And in the case of Maryland and Rutgers a decade ago, it was, okay, they can add some value. They add TV markets on the East Coast. They add New York City and the DMV. But we're not going to pay them as much because they're not going to bring us that kind of value. USC and UCLA in Los Angeles, we are going to pay them a full share. Washington and Oregon, remember back, and if I could go through all of our live streams, all of our videos, when Washington and Oregon were on hold by the Big Ten, what did that have to do with? And we discussed it at times. Revenue share. Did Washington and Oregon get a full share? No, they got a half share. Is that what the holdup was with the Big Ten announcing after they had applied way back last fall? Was it last fall or the fall before? I lose track of time. It was that they were negotiating how much they're worth. And I'm sure they started with, we want a full cut, full share. USC and UCLA just got it. Shoot, UCLA, they're not going to be any good. What are they bringing? They're bringing 25,000 people at the Rose Bowl. They got a full cut. Why don't we get a full cut? Well, that's what they were negotiating. And apparently Washington and Oregon lost that battle because they wanted to jump ship and play in the big conference. So that's what these conferences are weighing when they evaluate the schools. However, as we go forward, if this truly becomes the AFC and the NFC, and I don't know how the Big 12 is going to fit into that. I've got a couple of different theories. Whether instead of just taking one individual school and saying, okay, do they make the cut? Do they add value to what we do? That they look at, Pitt, NC State, Louisville all play good football. They all bring different things to the table. Okay, I think collectively we can add all three. And they're going to suffer in regards to a cut. And maybe they're going to make what they're making in the ACC right now. Maybe they're going to make that going forward, but at least they're playing relevant football in the big conference. They're safe. They've made it to the island. But they start to look at groups of programs together. I would have to think that the most vulnerable program out there currently in the ACC, because they're the one conference that's just hanging there, would be Wake Forest. Duke's got basketball. Pittsburgh has a market size. Boston College has a market size. Syracuse has, in a sense, a market size and a better football brand. We might size up the Big Ten and the SEC and what this war may look like. See, it's a partnership, but of course it's a war at the same time because they both want to be number one. They want to both be considered the best. Power rankings, of course, are pretty much mine. I'm not speaking for the collective group of the Voice of College Football, but my way too early top 25. Well, it's done. It's ready to go. It is ready to go. It's done. So we will release our way too early top 25. Let's not call it a way too early top 25. No. It's a pre-spring top 25. And does it actually make sense? No. These in the offseason don't actually make sense. Do they make sense to me? Yeah. They're my top 25, but there's no results for them to make sense. One of our favorite topics in all of college football is, of course, Notre Dame joining a conference. Notre Dame to the Big Ten. Maybe I'll put it the current version on that. Because many of these topics that are hot right now that you guys are watching out there, we produced videos on these things 5 years ago. Notre Dame to the Big Ten. How about this video where it all is going to land when it's all said and done? What is this all going to look like when it's all said and done? Thank you so much for the super chat coming in here. Dave comes back with this. In the state of Minnesota, only 14% of tax revenue go to state colleges and universities. The University of Minnesota only gets 14% of that. I don't know how much of that goes to sports. Only 14%? Only 14%? That seems like a lot of money. Do you mean if I lived and worked in the state of Minnesota, 14% of my tax money is going to universities? 14%? I think that's a ludicrous figure. That's horrible. There's fire, police, roads, infrastructure. 14%? To stuff all those kids' heads with a bunch of nonsense? Wow, that's terrible. That is terrible. Hate to hear that. I hate to hear that. And then Dave is also telling us that so out of the 14% out of tax revenue, that he says only 14%. To me, that sounds well, I can't get over that. I'm going to be thinking about that tomorrow. 14%? In a state like Minnesota, you have how many people? In a state like Minnesota, you've got, what do they have, 10 million people? Maybe not that many. In Ohio, it's like 13 million, so maybe it's not. But let's say it's 10 million people, and they're making X number of dollars. I'm not going to try to do the equation on that. I think the average person makes probably $60,000, $65,000 a year. Obviously, those 10 million people are not all employees, are not all of age to make money, but still, they give 14% to about 40 to 50,000 students out of that 10 million. That's 0.5%. 0.5%. And many of them are out of state. How is that justified at all? That seems horrible. I don't see how that's justified at all. All right. The University of Minnesota only gets 14% of that. Okay. So I make $100. I get $14. I make $100, $25. Yeah, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but out of that 14%, 14% goes to the University of Minnesota, which is only that just goes to show you that there are tons of colleges and universities that we don't even know about. I don't know how much of that goes to sports. Yeah. Yeah. I'm even trying to grasp and I'll get to those two calls in just a second. And we should probably just bring Tim in here, cancel the Big Ten Live show, make this the Big Ten Live show. We'll just keep it going. So Tim, if you're in the chat, you can join me if you'd like. And we'll just go right into the Big Ten Live show. Yeah, I even somewhat have a problem with if the football at the university or whatever the dynamics of how the sports earn revenue and cover the other sports, however that's paid for, whether it's all football or that particular school, men's basketball does well, women's basketball, another sport at particular times at some universities do fairly well financially, but basically it's a football driven income. If that sports department at any university, state-run university, runs on a deficit, what is the tax population, the state population, the public's responsibility to fund sports at a university? All right. I think it's zero, unless somebody could convince me different. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. DeReal, what's going on?
Hey, Mark. How are you doing this evening?
I am doing great. How are you?
Well, tough day, Mark. Every day I'm just trying to figure out a reason why I should even care about this sport anymore, Mark. I mean, as a Kentucky fan, it's like they're taking away the bowl games. Now you can pay players out in the open. I honestly don't see a way we're going to be able to compete at a high enough level to win anything or be in anything that actually matters.
Taking away the bowl games?
Well, making them meaningless. Nobody's going to care about the Outback Bowl, the Tax Slayer Bowl, and all that stuff. The bowl games are so meaningless in a 12-team playoff. I mean,
yeah, I understand.
It's not going to surprise me, honestly, if they go away in 5 years with the way everybody's treating them.
Yeah, you're right, but people still watch them.
I understand that,
that's still that's the only disconnect. Everything that you're stating right now is completely true based on my conversations with college football fans and based on how I feel about it. But I still watch the bowl games, still love the bowl games. And so they're still making money.
I understand that, but it's just like, as a fan, Mark, I don't see any sense of that money. And winning these bowl games used to mean something. You won the Music City Bowl, you used to brag about it, have an optimistic future to the season. Not every team can win the national championship, in my opinion. Actually, most teams, I don't believe, can ever win the national championship. So winning these bowl games was like a nice consolation prize, and for everybody just to devalue them to the point of why even show up and play, it's pretty disheartening.
Yeah, it really is. And they're not going to take my advice. And this is only semantics. I get it. But I wouldn't even call any of these playoff games bowl games.
I completely agree. Just call them the playoffs or quarterfinal game 1, quarterfinal game 2. Do something like that. I mean, the Peach Bowl, the Rose Bowl, they haven't been those bowl games in 10 years now, Mark. I mean, it's ridiculous.
You may have heard me say the other day that, of course, the Rose Bowl is the Big Ten champion against the Pac-12 champion. How many times did that happen in 10 years of the playoff? Once. One time.
Well, it's going to happen less going forward. Well, I can guarantee you that.
It's going to happen 0 times because there's no Pac-12. But
Right,
I
I
even saw a
know.
ridiculous comment in the story that came out. It was either the 5+7 model or the follow-up with the 14-team playoff proposal, that in a particular situation like the Sugar Bowl has had a contract and a partnership with the SEC forever. But that's going to go away. And of course, the two teams playing in the Sugar Bowl are only going to be chosen by them winning previous games. So Oregon could be playing, Duke in the Sugar Bowl. It's going to have no connection to the SEC. However, this is so incredibly pathetic. Let's say there's a matchup in the Sugar Bowl it's Ohio State and Kansas State, and in some other bowl game, the Fiesta is Georgia and Penn State. So it seems more like a Sugar Bowl matchup since Georgia won the SEC, that they could flip those matchups to give the Sugar Bowl more of a traditional feel. Once you've destroyed it, why make those considerations? It's just stupid.
Well, when was the last time this sport has made any decision that makes 100% sense?
Probably when they decided to legalize the forward pass.
Exactly. That's why, Mark. That's the answer to your question. I can't believe I'm saying this because I don't like Roger Goodell, but we need Roger Goodell in this to get some organization.
Why does Roger Goodell always get booed? Does Roger Goodell get booed because people just think it's cool to boo presidents or commissioners or whoever's in charge? Some people just think it's cool. We just boo them because we're anti-establishment and we're just going to boo them. Or is he truly getting booed for the decisions that he makes?
I think I think there's a large portion of both, but at first I think people just didn't like him, and then I think people liked not liking him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So,
become a joke for a
right.
lot of people. Yeah. And I like that he embraces it and doesn't mind it and just says, you know what, this is what it is. So I'm just going to egg it on, just let it go. Yeah.
So, Mark, with all these new rulings and stuff coming down, how can we compete? Like, seriously, I honestly want to know, how can an Oklahoma State, a Kansas State, a Kentucky, and Arkansas, how can they compete? What could they possibly do to ever be 10-2 going forward
Well, the
and be a
one
meaningful 10-2?
sure, and the one great hope for your school is you play in the right conference, which makes your schedule more difficult, but you have the resources and you have the brand behind you, that if you put together that kind of season, that may be a little bit less of a season on the surface than somebody from the Big 12 or the ACC, you are going to be given credit for it and you are going to have a path to the playoff. Now, good luck winning 10 out of 12 games, but you do have that opportunity.
I understand theoretically, but what can we do? That's the point where I struggle with it. It's like the SEC, 6 or 8 of the teams in there are going to be 20 of the best teams in the country. Florida could go 7-5 this year and be one of the 25 best teams in the country. I don't see how we compete going forward in the SEC.
What inherent disadvantage does Kentucky have? Just that it's not a football brand?
Yeah, a lack of will, Mark.
Well, there you go. Then that's what it is. They need to make. Clemson talks about this sometimes, that at some point, and it ran in line with Dabo Swinney being elevated to head coach, they decided we want to be a football power, even more so than we are now. We want to be an elite, and they were all in line, from the president, the chancellors, everybody on board with this is a priority for our university.
Right, I understand that. But even if Kentucky somehow did that, Mark, okay, they still could be the 7th or 8th best team in the SEC because they've got to compete with schools like Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma, and so on and so on. So
Well,
even if you have,
why can't they be the best?
Because we don't have the foundational advantages and recruiting advantages of the Southerner teams
Bingo.
have.
Okay. As I asked that question, that was the one thing that came to mind for me. You play in a football deficient state, so it's difficult. You know, What was the last state that, I don't know where Kentucky ranks, if the states were ranked 1 through 50 in regards to football talent, but much like the recruiting rankings, it obviously falls off a cliff. And then it doesn't really matter if you're 38th or 42nd. I don't know where Kentucky would rank. I know that the football's not bad, that they play good high school football, that there are viable 4-star recruits that come out of that state.
Right, right. And we get those 4 stars, but the problem is, like Kentucky this year, I think they've been as all in football as they have ever been. And they've got one of the 25 best overall classes in the country, Mark. But yet they're like 13th in the SEC out of 16 teams. It's just insane what you have to do.
Yeah. But other than that, there's really nothing that I can see that's stopping them from being that they're being paid, at least on the surface. Now the merchandise and all those other things are different. The NIL collective support and all that ranges all over the place, but the TV and the media deal is the same for Kentucky as it is Alabama and Georgia.
Right, but I just don't see how we're going to get the players. That's why I'm concerned. Is we need the players to compete. It's just going to be tough going forward, Mark. Moose, I think's probably got it right. 7 or 8 wins is probably the ceiling for Kentucky now.
No, it's not the ceiling. No, it's not the ceiling. No, it's not the ceiling.
Why do you say that?
How far in advance has the SEC made schedules?
I think it's just this year.
They just did this year? Okay.
Yeah.
But if you took this year's schedule and you took what appears to be their model going forward and made a few other years' schedules and compared those schedules to Kentucky's previous schedules, yes, they are tougher for 2 reasons. That the SEC West has typically been the better division out of the 2, not necessarily recently, but for a long, long time, of course, it was. And there's a balanced schedule. And then number 2, of course, Oklahoma and Texas. And when you add more difficult teams, then your likelihood of facing those teams goes up in place of facing Vandy every year or South Carolina every year. So yeah, the schedules are going to be tougher, but they're not going to be that much tougher.
I guess. I'm just very worried, Mark. I'm very pessimistic about going forward. I'm glad you're more hopeful than me.
Well, I'm not necessarily hopeful. I'm just telling you that there's opportunity. I'm not saying it's difficult or it's going to happen or I trust Kentucky's leadership to get it done.
Well, I trust. I mean, we've gotten this far, so hopefully they can continue. It's just the road to climb has just gotten so significantly bigger. And I see people say just develop. Listen, development can work up until a certain point. I don't think you can outdevelop Texas, Georgia, Oklahoma. They've got good training facilities. They got good coaching staffs. They've got a development down there as well.
Are those all the Michigan fans saying just develop them?
I actually saw Erica saying that and was an Iowa fan, but
I was just kind of kidding there.
Yeah, well, they're going to be in for a rude awakening this year, Mark, when they go 9-3 or 8-4, miss the playoffs, and they're going to act like they're so shocked and disappointed. They're doing it all at 2019 LSU. They won the national championship, and they're talking about next season, which is very interesting strategy to me. But
I already anticipate what Michigan fans are going to say after having that type of season, that they just won the national championship. I think this national championship buys them a lot of time. For the typical Michigan fan, I might be wrong. There are certainly going to be Michigan fans that are going to be more of the Ohio State type fan that just says, well, every year, let's go win the national championship. And, we're not going to say, oh, we won a national championship 5 years ago. That's good enough. But I do think a lot of Michigan fans, and I say this to Steve Dace, and he completely agrees with me, that the the mindset of the Michigan fan is much different than the Ohio State fan when it comes to that, like how much they have to win. I think this national championship is going to be good for them for a while before they grumble about maybe winning 8 and 9 games.
Right. And Mark, I think I went a little too far comparing them to St. Peter's, Georgia, the Florida Gulf Coast, and those teams. But you know what I will compare them to? I'll compare them to Auburn. That's what they are to me. Is they're an Auburn level program over the last 25 years.
Yeah, that's a great comparison. That really is. Because Auburn's been all over the place, just like Michigan has. Of course, they have played in 2 national championship games, won one. Could have played a little bit closer to a couple other championship games. Of course, went undefeated in 04 and were denied that opportunity. But it's not unlike Auburn to go 6-6, 5-7. Now, Michigan did that in a more concentrated period of time. Auburn tends to be more of a roller coaster. But yeah, 9-3 is kind of what Auburn does. 8-4.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with being 9-3 and being the second or third best team and every decade or two having a national championship. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just you got to know your place, Mark. That's all it is.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone's responded to the Michigan-Auburn comparison, but I think it's apt. I think it works.
I'm glad you think so. I thought about it after the criticisms you gave me, and I am willing to change my opinion, admit when something is wrong. And John, yes, Michigan has a 0% chance to win the national championship this year. I'm sorry. They won it last year. They proved me wrong. They have no chance to win it this year. 0, zilch, none. They have the same chance as Kentucky, Louisville, FIU, Duquesne, whatever school you want to throw out there.
Ralph is telling us that in the past 30 years, Michigan has the 4th best winning percentage and the 4th most bowl, whatever that means, games, I guess. Yeah, they go to bowl games, sure.
I didn't realize bowl games mattered so much, Mark.
Michigan is the 6th best record in the last 30 years. So that's 94 through 23. Really? Yeah. I'm not saying that Ralph's not accurate with that. I wouldn't have guessed that they would have been quite that high. I don't think Ralph
wants to tell us who number through consistency.
1 is. I'm sorry.
Number 1's Ohio State, right?
Yeah.
2's Bama, I'm assuming.
Probably, even with a rough start to that stretch. I would think so. Florida State's kind of difficult to judge because they've been all over the place too, but Oklahoma would be very high. Even though when you go back 30 years, Oklahoma had a bad 94 up to 2000 before Bob Stoops took over. So that would weigh down their record. So, yeah, Florida State, they've had some rough stretches, but they were obviously on fire from 94 to 2000 and a few years beyond that. But I'm sure they're in the top 6.
Would Penn State potentially make an appearance on that list?
Yeah, that's a good question. Man, I don't know who would be on that list. It's everyone I bring up had a rough time at a certain point, like LSU from the late 80s up until when Saban showed up. They were like barely over 500 for about 12 or 13 years. And a lot of that's during that stretch right there. But then they kicked it in with Saban, Les Miles. I don't think they would quite be in the top 6. I know Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Alabama are in, and I'm almost positive Florida State would be in there as well. USC might be in there for as bad a decade as they've had. They haven't been horrible. Their record's actually, if you look at Clay Helton's record, it's not that bad. And of course, Pete Carroll was crazy dominant. So they might be in the top 6.
Well, Mark, it's hard to be consistent for 30 years. I mean, that's all that tells you is how it's super difficult to maintain a high level of football. And that's what makes Ohio State the premier program in the Big Ten, is they've just maintained. I mean, Nick Saban talks about it. It's easy to win one and then come back down to earth. It's harder to maintain the standard than it is to meet the standard.
I would like to get our guy Tim Prangley on here. I saw a list, and I'm not saying it's a credible list, but I saw some as I was preparing for the Big Ten show. I do a bunch of Google searches, obviously, and just to see what other schools are up to, and Google all the Big Ten schools to see what news is out there. But somebody had posted a projection of the records and the power rankings of what the Big Ten is going to look like for the next 5 years. And they had USC down at like 6. They
Who
went
knows?
two into Lincoln Riley.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, he needs to find a defense. Did you see a few weeks ago, Josh Pate did a tier ranking of all the conference, and he had USC as a tier 3 program in the Big Ten.
Really?
Yeah, he had Ohio State, Michigan, tier 1, Oregon, Penn State, tier 2, and then USC, Iowa, Wisconsin, those level teams in tier 3.
Yeah. Well, his thought must be very immediate.
Yeah, I think it was over like the last 3 years.
Well, yeah, if you're just looking back and not trying to gauge, okay, where do we stand now and going forward, then all you have to do is simply look at records, and that's going to tell you what it is.
Right, but I don't see USC going forward being clearly better than any of those 4 teams above them.
Well, I don't think clearly, but I do think that USC has shown us throughout history that when they're right, they can be, great.
Right, but the question is Lincoln Riley that coach? I mean, he's very entertaining. Offense is very fun, but eventually you got to have a defense, Mark. I mean, and I don't know if Miller Moss is the answer. Like, he's not going to be as good as Caleb Williams, Mark. I mean, Caleb Williams is one of the best prospects in college football history, I'd argue.
Yes.
So for Miller Moss to step in those shoes, in my opinion, they automatically have to regress on offense.
I hear you. Most likely, yes, because Caleb Williams is that talented. But the defense, they believe that they've shored some things up there.
Yeah, I hear that every year. Also, every year their defense is going to get better. Every year. And then they play San Jose State and they give up 28 points the first game of the season. I mean, some things never change, Mark. It's like Florida State. You know when they're going to leave the ACC? It'll be tomorrow. It's always tomorrow, Mark.
I saw you make that comment a couple days ago.
It's accurate. I mean, everybody says they're leaving tomorrow. Everybody says they're one step closer. I'm pretty sure when you had Genetics 56 on, he said they were going to leave February 16th. If August 15th is a date I had out there, just pick a random date out of a hat, say they're going to leave at this date, and then when it doesn't happen, just say they're going to leave at another date.
But I've never seen a school and a conference go at it in court like they are, filing lawsuits against each other every other day, and that relationship to last.
Well, Mark, as far as I understand, Florida State did sign a grant of rights and then an extension to the grant of rights. And, Mark, it's tough for Florida State, but they should have had the foresight to be able to see the consequences down the road that this could happen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I posed those questions to our Florida State guys because that seemed to be the most obvious question to start with was, okay, well, did anybody hold a gun to their head to sign the original grant of rights or to extend it? But there seemed to be various, not necessarily that can be refuted, but what the ACC has done under the table and behind the curtain has not been the most reputable in their dealings with networks. And that's where it seems as though Florida State is making some ground, is that the ACC is finally called uncle, and they are basically saying, we are going to allow you out of this lawsuit, and we will negotiate with you on a settlement. Seems to be headed in that direction.
Right. Mark, I like to play the wait and see game. I know there's rumors, speculation, and all that stuff, but I actually want to see some hard factual evidence before making these bold proclamations that Florida State's going to leave this offseason or they're going to leave in 2025. I want actual factual data. I want a court filing. I want some tangible evidence. And also, this part of it always humors me, is Florida State fans, when they got pulled as the 5th overall seed, were saying, how dare they hate the ACC, complete disrespect to the ACC, it's a conspiracy theory, it's a joke. And now all offseason, Mark, the ACC is trash, they're horrible, they're a terrible conference. I wonder where the committee got the idea the ACC was terrible, Mark.
That is an excellent point. And I got to say, I will have to admit that one went right by me. And it seems very obvious now that it's been stated, but good job by you. Yes. And we see this all the time. And that's one of the difficult portions of mediation and arbitration, is that a team will have to badmouth a player during the arbitration process and give all the reasons why he's got different holes in his game. He's not really as good as his peers. He's not the best at this. He's the 20th best at this. And to really just run him through, rake him over the coals about how crappy of a player is. But then they come out of it and the arbitrator makes his decision and they shake hands and agree on a contract. But we still want you. And now we're going to talk you up as being the greatest thing in the world. But yeah, that's a great point about the ACC and Florida State saying that this is a horrendous conference that we've got to get out of. However, we were telling you at the end of last season that it's a reputable conference that we just won and we should be in the playoff.
Right. If you want another one, Florida State, there was the speculation Florida State was going to protest the Orange Bowl. It's like, Florida State needs all the money they can get. They're hiring JP Morgan as a private equity firm to get out the ACC grant of rights. They need every dime, nickel, and cent out there. They're not going to protest any game.
Yeah, and I'll make one other point, and then you can close out the call. My point on that would be, again, whether you like the Florida State decision or not, this decision by the committee on Florida State, and I don't like it in principle, the committee, based on the criteria, has every right to make that decision. They made a decision that Florida State is a different football team without Jordan Travis, and that decision was backed up by play on the field through 2 games, that it showed that their offense scored, I think, 16 and 16 points in 2 games, and much of that was defense and running game aided. The passing attack was atrocious. And even going into that Florida game, that it could be argued that they had played a fairly weak schedule in a fairly weak conference and may not necessarily be the best team, even though they were an undefeated team, much like at the front end of the playoff era in 2014, Florida State got into the playoff as an undefeated team. Most college football analysts said this is not one of the 4 best teams in the country. They squeaked by the likes of, a run of Boston College type teams by a field goal. They finished undefeated. They played a bad Duke team. Georgia Tech, a marginal Georgia Tech team in the ACC championship game. And then what happens? They go out and get smoked by 39 points against Oregon in the Rose Bowl in the playoff.
Right. I see this narrative from Michael Campbell. So this is my favorite narrative that occurred during the ACC celebration week. The SEC fans are insane for rooting for the SEC. Only then ACC fans rooting for AC. That was another funny thing. But Michael Campbell said the ACC conference was 6-4 versus the SEC conference. Wow, Mark. Did you know Wake Forest beat Vanderbilt, Mark? I mean, that's the game that really changed the tide of the college football season. Or Florida State beat Florida by a touchdown. Holy cow, Mark. I mean, the ACC should get all the respect in the world because Florida State went out there and beat the fifth best team in the SEC in LSU and maybe the 11th best team in the SEC in Florida State. The lack of depth people go into these arguments just amazes me. Can we please have some depth when having conversations other than 6-4 or 13-0? Can we please go beyond the headlines, people?
The most credible wins for the ACC were Miami beat Texas A&M. They were pretty comparable teams. Both went 7-5 in the regular season, 7-6 overall. Where are the other ones that are, Clemson beat South Carolina. Clemson should beat South Carolina. That's a 9-4 team taking on a 5-7 team. Of course, the nice win for the SEC on the flip side was Kentucky beat Louisville, which would be the equivalent of pick your Kentucky team in the ACC.
Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech beat Alabama.
If that actually happened, Mark, the amount of trash the SEC would have gotten. You know it. I know it. The SEC is the worst conference because Virginia Tech beat Alabama by 7 points. Yeah. Yes, Mike. Florida State did beat LSU in Florida. Okay. I mean, Georgia beat Georgia Tech. Is that not impressive?
And that's a nice win. And that's a nice win for Florida State. LSU's a good team, but LSU was what, the 4th seed? No. They were the
5th or 6th.
Seed. Yeah. So they were the 5 seed playing the 1 seed in the ACC.
Right. People got to put these things in context. Now Michael Campbell's going back to they were undefeated.
Actually, technically speaking, we should have matched up Virginia Tech and Georgia. I was forgetting that Alabama actually won the SEC championship game. Virginia Tech against Georgia. That would have been the equivalent of the 7-6 team defeating the conference runner-up.
I'm sure both outcomes of those games, Virginia Tech would lose by at least 45 points.
Yeah.
I don't understand the Florida State love, Mark. I just don't get it. It makes no rational sense. Why is a Notre Dame fan commenting about Florida State? LSU lost one game to the ACC?
Yeah, I don't understand that. They got beat down by the ACC. We're just speaking a lot of nonsense at this point. So, DeReal, I'll give you the parting shot. Anything else you want to say?
I can't wait to hear from Tier 3 Tim coming up.
Okay. Excellent. Thanks, DeReal. All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. And I apologize because our caller here has been waiting forever. So I appreciate you being here. Welcome to the show.
How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for your patience.
Hey, Mark.
On your mind.
No, are you kidding me? It's well worth it. How long have we been doing this for?
How long have we been doing this for? Years and years and years and years and years.
Years. Well, when I say we, meaning we do have some type of relationship.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've been talking now for, I want to say, 5 years.
You're an astute college football fan.
Well,
you trick me though, because you constantly change your name.
Yeah, I know.
When you come up there, I'm like, I thought I knew who that was, but I wasn't quite sure. Wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah. But you and Cam have gone back further. You and Cam have gone back 10 years. I didn't realize that. So Cam has been coming every Wednesday on your show. Or you guys have been talking for 10 years every Wednesday night?
Well, it's not quite that long. So actually, the first time that Cam and I got together was prior to the 2013 bowl game, Champ Sports Bowl, whatever they called it then, the Russell Athletic Bowl against Louisville. When Miami played, I found Cam online. I need a Miami perspective, brought him on. I'm going to have to research this to find out exactly when we started a weekly show, because we didn't start it right out of the gate. I would just have him on to record at first.
What do you mean by that?
I would just have
it
him
wasn't
on
live?
to do records.
Oh, it wasn't live?
No.
Oh.
Those 360 whatever we're at now, those are all live, but some of those are with the wholesome one as
Oh, yeah.
well.
Hey, he went on. He's smart. He used the platform in his education. He had us from the get. I mean, what I mean to say is he used all of this not just for nonsense, and then he landed the gig as a college football coach, right?
He's on the Minnesota staff.
Oh, on Minnesota, not some little D2 place or D3. That's what I assumed.
The University of Minnesota, PJ Fleck.
See?
Now he's not a position coach. He's some type of
whatever. Even if he's the water, even whatever.
Yeah.
He still, I mean, it was smart. He was using it the whole time then imagine he can just go and he uses that in the, what do you call it? By the way, I missed an interview today. But anyway, I neglected it. But anyway, wait, yeah, you can go ahead and say it, or you don't have to.
I've got nothing to say. I'm not passing any judgment on anyone.
He can point. Can you imagine sitting there? Can you imagine the power behind sitting there, Mark, and telling the hiring person, hey, go to this website and look me up. And the hiring guy, imagine if you're the guy hiring and you can go listen and talk college football for hours at a time.
Yes, he was wise in doing that. He
very wise is the word. Wise is the word.
You're telling me that someday I'm going to be able to sit in an interview and point to this channel?
No, because you use this. This is like you're giving back. Anyway, whatever. You know what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm just kidding, because I don't want to work for anyone.
Yeah, right.
I'm hoping not to work for anybody else the rest of my life is my
correct
goal.
Yes, sir. Which leads to so are you going to start being a little bit less traditional? You know, I hate that word elite, and you like to substitute elite for tradition.
I do.
So, well, I think so. Which
are we talking about college football? Or are we talking about me now?
Both. Because college football is tradition, and we're starting to move away from tradition with NIL and conference realignment. And I feel like that's making some people uneasy, because some people love tradition. I love tradition. Okay. I'm Catholic. Can you get any more traditional than being Catholic? Have you been to a mass? It's the same mass for, I don't know how you have.
I am not Catholic myself, but I've had to attend both weddings and funerals that were Catholic.
How traditional are those ceremonies? You know what I'm saying? I love tradition, but when here's the thing: when I'm watching the show and I'm hearing all these people gripe, I'm like, what's the problem here? Is it that do you like tradition or you don't like tradition? Are you for NIL or are you not for NIL? Are you for the players getting paid? Or are we like, what's going on here?
I'm going to be distracted until I tell this story. So am I allowed to tell a story since you brought up the Catholic Church?
Of course.
My son was probably about 19 or 20 at the time. So this was 5+ years ago. My son and I are at a Catholic funeral, and we were going up for the communion, and he filed out of the pew before I did. So he was in front of me, and he got up in front of the priest. And my son, we go to non-denominational churches, so it's very informal. So my son, he wants to take communion. He goes in front of the priest, and the priest asks him something which I can't hear, and my son doesn't know how to respond. And the priest won't give him communion. And you know what my son's response? My son's response was, he just kind of like went like this, and he goes, "Hey man, we're on the same side."
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm laughing, and we go back to the pews, and I'm like, and I don't even know what I told the priest because I didn't know what the magic words were either.
Yeah.
But I got my communion wine and cracker.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to
But
college football.
Notre Dame is Catholic, obviously. Boston
Yeah.
Boston College is Catholic.
Yeah.
And then Holy Cross is Catholic, of course. But yeah, so with the whole tradition thing, so are we rooting for tradition on Voice of College Football, or are we against tradition? Because I think we're college football purists.
Yes.
We look at it purely from a fan perspective. I love the comment about the tax thing. I thought that got us on the right page. I think that's why you chose that comment. Obviously, there was an incentive there for you, but yeah, but but we just have to follow the money. We have to follow the money. But this channel stays pretty clean from that. Yeah.
I'm just smirking and enjoying your evaluation of the channel and how I run it.
Right.
If you've noticed, and I'm sure you have, because you brought up the tax comments that were made by myself, and then the one in response that was made by our buddy Dave,
Right.
is that yes, if anyone can tell, anytime I can have an opportunity to kind of weave my social
Yep.
my social commentary into things about society and so forth, I certainly take that opportunity.
Sure. Yeah, but I think also, and bowl games do matter to real, and I'll tell you why. Because there's a payday for those universities. If I'm the AD and my college football coach comes to me and says, "Hey, we're not going to the Outback Bowl because it's useless," I'm going to tell coach, I'm going to say, "Coach, but we're going to get paid $3 million, and we need that money, more than $3 million. We need that money not only for your program, but for the other sports program as well, coach. So yeah, we're going to that Outback Bowl, and yeah, we're going to compete.
What DeReal's talking about is that bowl games used to carry a ton of cachet in terms of prestige and attention, and the quality of the games were higher. And now we have players opting out of the games. We have a playoff that is the goal of fans and players to get to the playoff. And so if you fall short of that, then the bowl games are this consolation prize that nobody wants anymore. But they still make money. Yes, still people still watch them. Therefore, they still get good TV ratings and generate money.
I thought that was the point of going to the bowl game.
It might be for the school itself. It's not the point for me as a college football fan. For me, the point of the bowls is for me to watch two teams that we rarely get to see play against each other play.
This is what this is all about, though, Mark. I'm refereeing soccer now. By the way, guess what? I'm starting soon. I can't wait. They're going to put me behind the plate, and I'm going to call balls and strikes for baseball.
Oh, nice. What league are we talking about?
Florida High School.
Nice.
Florida High School Sports Athletic Association in Miami-Dade County. In Miami-Dade, balls and strikes.
That is very cool. Yeah, high school baseball. Now there you go.
I can't wait.
Doesn't get much better than that.
Oh, it's bringing back because that was my first sport. You know do you remember who I told you who my next door neighbor was?
No.
Does Tom Foley ring a bell?
Tom Foley played. Well, definitely. I know that name. Wasn't he an infielder for the Cardinals and the Reds? Maybe.
Nailed it. Except for he didn't. He played for the Reds, the Expos, the Pirates.
Oh, he's coming back to me now. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was my next door neighbor. And then his sons, Brian and Brett, they pulled me in and they taught me all the sports. and they taught me baseball too. Yeah. So I'm going back to baseball. Yeah.
Good for
I
you.
can't wait. We had a couple clinics, and
Yes.
I was getting coached. I know we'll get. I was
Yes,
getting
for as
coached by
exciting as that is, I
yeah.
don't know that everyone in the chat wants to hear about your umpiring career.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so much fun. But and then the other thing is with the don't we have to look at the money in all of this? Because this is NIL, this is just the next step, because first we did the NIL, now it's the conference realignment. We have to make everything kosher. Because how are we going to do NIL and not do conference realignment?
Why does there have to be conference realignment? Because there's NIL. NIL is just simply an initiative that is allowing players to benefit from their name, image, and likeness like they should have been able to this entire time.
Okay. I'm a youth soccer referee, and I travel around the state to do work. And I notice these families, and the industry itself is a business. Youth sports, Mark, is a business. So if it's a business at youth sports, it's a business at the college football level.
Sure.
And when these ADs and presidents are looking at the numbers, it's all about the numbers, Mark. It's all about the money. I bet you most of these program directors and presidents could care less about their sports programs as long as they see the money signs coming in. Sorry to say, but it's true. Even on our channel.
I don't disagree with you. I will disagree with you in that I know that not all of them think that way.
Oh, a significant percentage? I think so.
No, let me clarify this. You can be a
course.
businessman. You can be about the numbers. You can understand what makes the world go round in your industry and still care about it and still want the pure aspects of that industry for students to be taught in the classroom and for those things to happen. But still, yes, you are charged with running an athletic department, with running a conference. Yes, both can exist at the same time.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
You got to Bristol, Connecticut.
Yes.
You know where I'm going with this?
No.
When did you, at what point did, like, oh, because like I'm pretty low, right? I think most of us on your channel is pretty low in regards to like societal income and societal that. So at what point did things like you can't tell me that you remained a purist as a producer.
So
at ESPN,
so
if you told me this is purist, this is pretty pure.
Yes.
But
so
ESPN,
the first thing I'm going to say is that I hope no one, and I'm going to the good book for this, I hope nobody in the chat or anybody that's listening to us at any point thinks of themselves more lowly than they should just because they don't have a certain type of job or don't make a certain amount of money. Their value, our value as people, is exactly the same. Nor should they think higher than themselves because they make a certain amount of money or they've got a certain kind of position. But I get your point. Maybe there's lower level economic jobs represented in my viewership. I don't know that. YouTube knows it, that's for sure.
And then at what point when you were in Bristol and these ADs, they have to conform to the norm, and the norm is the cash. The norm is the cash, and they have to conform it. It's the institutional norm. And if you're going to play ball, you got to play ball their way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you're not going to survive in any industry unless you understand the way the game's played. And you're most likely not going to be the person to change the way the game's played.
And I have to relearn that again and again.
You and I
Yeah.
fought that for 19 years in Bristol myself.
Did you?
Sure, absolutely I did. Yes, I was a
How'd you last that
nonconformist.
long? How'd you last that long fighting it?
Well, I didn't have a mindset that I'm going to fight and rebel against everything just for the sake of it. No,
Right.
it was still a well-run company, well-run department, very good to its employees, all those things. So I didn't fight against those things that didn't need it, but I certainly was a person that I'm not a group thinker. I'm not somebody who just takes things at face value. I'm not somebody that just takes direction and says,
Right.
you know, throws up the
Which is
I was going
why
to
I
speak.
think you were so successful.
Well, I don't know that I was that successful, but I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Well, one of my first bosses told me, Mark, you're good for us because you're not a group thinker and you challenge the standards and the policies and the norms, and you just don't sit there and nod your head and take instructions. Like I was always the one at the production meetings when we were given our execution of, let's say, this week is the French Open, and we need to do X, Y, and Z. And we need to do. I was always, everyone else was kind of nodded, and we were an execution department. So you would get your instructions and your directions, and you'd go execute it, and you'd go inform the staff and write policies and procedures to make the execution of the productions as good as possible. I would always say, why are we doing that? That doesn't make any sense. Why don't we do it this way? Or why don't we think of this or think of that? Or it's
Yeah.
just my nature.
You and me both.
Yes, I hear that in your arguments.
Yeah.
And for better or worse, I raised my son in particular like that, and he very much reflects that. He only respects people who have earned respect.
My dad is like that. Well. Okay.
Well, you got anything for us? Anything else tonight?
It's great to be a Miami Hurricane. It's great to be. I went to the Miami scrimmage for baseball. 82, 85, 91, 99. No, 2001. 82, 85, 99, 2001, or something like that. The World Series championships.
That's what I figured you were.
Yeah.
I went to 2 World Series. I covered 2 World Series, and Miami was in at least one of them, maybe both of them, in the late 90s.
Oh, yeah. Those were good times.
All right, sir.
All right, Mark.
We appreciate it.
Hey,
Good to see you.
you kidding me? I'll talk to you later. Can't wait.
Sounds good. Thanks, man.
Bye.
And certainly one of the aspects of merging our 2 shows, meaning we've got our Big Ten Live show that we do each and every Friday night at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. That really goes right into the 9 o'clock USC call-in show with Tim and Matt. They do such an exceptional job. They certainly don't need me over there meddling in the USC channel, but join Tim and Matt in just about an hour over on the USC channel. But we always do the Big Ten Live show at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. And just because we had a decent number of people here, I didn't want to break up this live stream and transition over to the Big Ten live stream. So we'll just keep it right here. And we do appreciate all of you being here at the Voice of College Football. Any other topics that we need to hit on? I was going to go down the path of the 12-team playoff and the 5+7 that was announced this week versus the playoff proposal, the 14 teams. But shoot, we covered that earlier this week on our live stream as well. I'm checking out the chat. Always interested in what you folks are talking about. I believe I missed a super chat. Did I? I did not. Okay. All right, folks. I believe we've done enough damage tonight. What do you think? And John letting us know, of course, that Matt Zemek was on the Ocho that you can catch right here at the Voice of College Football. It's on our content list. Check it out. And of course, John delivering Michigan Live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So since we are segueing into a Big Ten show here, keep in mind what we've got plenty of Big Ten offerings throughout the week. Starts on Monday night. Myself, Matt Zemek, Tim Prangley with USC Live, Mondays at 11 Eastern, over on the USC channel. Then Tuesday, a triple header of Big Ten live shows. Corey Brad and myself, Iowa Hawkeyes Live, 5:30 Eastern, followed by Nebraska Live with Justin Adams and myself on the Nebraska channel. And then the aforementioned John D'Adamo, Michigan Live, 8 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday night. I get together with Steve Hellwagon, Kevin Noon, and Tony Gerdeman to talk Buckeyes on Ohio State Live. That's every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And I am so incredibly excited to announce a ton of great things, probably about a month from right now. Some things need to clear through. We need to get settled, reset, and we'll get the battery charged and ready to roll and have some great announcements for all of you here at the Voice of College Football, because we do aim to do a better job and deliver better content than ever. All right. Thank you, Moose. Thank you, Mike. We've got 343 Films in the chat. Dave E. Yes, please get the likes up. We ask that you just hit the like button, that you, of course, use the Amazon link that's in the description section of all the videos, including this one. So use the Amazon link. It's the same shopping experience. Doesn't cost you a dime or a penny. Doesn't even cost you a nickel. None of that. Cost you nothing. And it's a great shopping experience for you. It's the same one that you have with the Amazon link that you currently use. So you might as well use ours. Let's say you spend $100 at Amazon. Well, you are currently sending Amazon $100. Spend $100 at Amazon using our link, and I cannot give you a direct, specific dollar value. Might be $3, might be $5, might be $8, depending on the item. But you funnel some of that as a contribution to the Voice of College Football. How about that? So please do that. In the meantime, I'm going to start working on some content involving all the topics that we've talked about: realignment, 14-team college football playoff, what that would have looked like over the last 10 years, 5-year projections. Got my coaches' rankings done. They'll be released here soon. Got my pre-spring top 25. That's done. Got to record that and deliver that. Good stuff. Appreciate you being here. Voice of College Football, USC Live, the call-in show, 9 o'clock Eastern Time, and a special that's going on. Let's see, currently, I believe right now, let me double check, should be right here on the same channel where we've got our tribute to the Wolfman that is being hosted by Joey Foster. That should be on right now. And I did promise them that I would be jumping on. So we will get there at some point tonight. But yeah, in remembrance of Dale the Wolfman Wolfley, it's on the West Virginia channel. And I believe it's right here as well. So check that out. The Wolfman was an amazing guy and media talent as well. All right, folks, appreciate you being here. Keep it locked in here at the Voice of College Football. Listen to Dave. He's got all those national championships, of course. So listen to Dave, hit the like button, and keep it locked in here at the Voice of College Football. Subscribe. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. And we will see you next time. Most of us are on the internet pretty much all the time. It's fun, you get to socialize, you get entertained, and in this day and age, it's pretty much necessary. And even if you're one of those people that's not on the internet all the time, you know what is? Your personal information. And there are people out there trying to hack you all the time. They want your email address, they want your phone number, they want your place of employment, and they want to do bad things with it. There's also fairly legitimate corporations and companies that want your information. They want it for marketing purposes. They're going to buy it, they're going to sell it, they're going to trade it. At the very least, it's annoying to you. It's a nuisance, it's aggravating. Your email gets cluttered up with spam email. You get robocalls all the time. That's at the very least. At the worst, it's a threat to your family, to your friends, to your personal information, to your banking, to your finances, to your security, to your safety, to your identity. It can be pretty serious. This video is sponsored by Aura. I got hacked and it was pretty obvious. This was about 8 or 9 months ago, and there were red flags all over the place. And I didn't exactly know what to do, but I knew I needed to do something quickly. I mean quickly. I researched 8, 10, or 12 companies immediately. I went all over the place. I asked people. I was online looking for the best company that could serve my needs and secure my information. You know who I found? Aura. And I'm glad I did. It was amazing. I contacted them. They got right back to me immediately. Their customer support is phenomenal. Their customer service is first-rate, friendly. They are detailed. They know what they're doing, and they do it right, and they will protect you. In addition to everything I just mentioned, they've got a password keeping service. They keep your credit score. They notify you anytime there's a possible data breach. This has happened to me a number of times. I'm getting notifications all the time when there's a possible compromise to my credit score or anything that I don't want. They've got a VPN that will allow you to browse the internet anonymously. It's amazing. And again, customer service support available 24/7. Click the link in the description section below and get 2 free weeks of Aura. Protect your finances, protect your information, protect your privacy, protect your identity. I did, and I'm glad I did. Aura, thank you so much for what you've done for me, and now for my Voice of College Football community.